Welcome back to the channel, everybody. In tonight's video, I'm going to be going over the Law Tactical folder and whether it's right for you in your build. But before I get too much into that, I do want to mention that yesterday was a big milestone in the channel history. I rolled over 1,000 subs. I know that's nowhere near even a drop in a bucket to professional YouTubers, but I am by far not a professional YouTuber. I'm just a regular guy that likes to go over some of the guns and gear that I've come across in my time and share my experiences with you all. So, well, I definitely appreciate all of my subs that I've gotten, all 999 up to this point. It was one Eduardo Gonzalez that rolled over the 1,000 subs. So, Eduardo, thank you very much. So the Law Tactical folder has been out for many years now. It's gone through a few different generations. The ones that I have in particular here are the Gen 3Ms. I don't have the history behind the previous generations, though I do understand that some previous versions used to be made out of aluminum. These current newest generations are made out of 4140 steel. They don't even make them in aluminum anymore whatsoever. So just quickly, what does the Law Tactical folder do? Well, for an AR platform, they have never been able to have, at least for a direct impingement standard AR-15 platform, it's never had a ability to have a folding stock on it due to the fact of the way the operating system works. So you have your bolt carrier group. Let me just move this out of the way. You have your bolt carrier group, which you see right here. And when every round is fired, that comes back and extends further into the receiver extension here. In the receiver extension, you have a buffer, you have a spring. Due to the nature of that, you cannot have a stock on it that folds. So it was never really designed that way. Law Tactical, when they did start having these folding mechanisms, it did give you the opportunity for AR owners to be able to fold their stock to make it further more compact. And while there are different brands of folders out there, I know Sylvan is one of them, and there may be a couple other ones. The Law Tactical branded ones, these are the ones that are really considered to be the most well-regarded ones available on the market today. Don't have any experience with any of the other ones, but I have had other platforms of weapons that do have folding stocks on them, and I'll talk about them a little bit later in the video. So the Law Tactical folder, as I mentioned, it's made out of 4140 steel. The mechanism itself is 8.5 ounces, and there's a part inside, kind of like a bolt extension that will give you, make up for the added length that you have, the contact between your buffer and your bolt carrier group. So altogether, by adding a Law Tactical folder to your AR, it's going to add a total of 10.5 ounces. Again, 4140 steel, very durable, very hefty. It attaches to your gun by way of typically where the end of your receiver would be. You would have your receiver end plate and your castle nut and your buffer tube. That would all screw into your receiver here. Simply what this does is when you remove your buffer tube, you will take the folding mechanism. As you can see there's the receiver extension. You will thread this into the threaded portion. I should say you should set this on here, and then there's a threaded insert that tightens down. Once that's tightened down with the included tool, which comes with a kind of a sheet metal screwdriver that is preset, it's pre-torqued. So once you tighten it down and the ears start bending on it, you've reached desired torque. You will then screw down this retaining screw right here to keep that locked into place. Whereas your, oops, sorry, bumped the camera. Whereas your buffer retaining pin would typically be in your lower receiver here, it will now be in this hinge side of the Law Tactical folder. After you thread your buffer tube or receiver extension into it, and then tighten it down with a castle nut, just like you typically would with any other AR. And again, here is the receiver extension that I was talking about. Simply plugs in to the end of your BCG, and again, that makes up for that extra length that the folding mechanism itself adds onto here. And overall, it does add 1.3 inches of length to your, from the end of, say, length of pole, from the end of your buttstock to your back end of your receiver. So if you typically have your carbine buffer stock on here, it will, carbine extension tube on your receiver extension, or even if you had a V5 or a Volter A5, it's going to add another 1.3 inches. So if you typically like to run your buttstock all the way forward without running a law tactical folder, you are now going to have an additional 1.3 inches to deal with. As far as colors go, they currently offer them in two different colors. You got the black and you got the flat dark earth. This is my Daniel Defense Mark 18 that I've discussed in another video. Originally came with the black one on it from the factory. I acquired the flat dark earth one to kind of give it another shade of FDE to this gun itself. And I moved this one over here to my 12.5 receiver. I believe that's the only two colors that are made. They say the black one has a diamond-like, or a DLC, diamond-like coating finish on it, whereas the flat dark earth is Cerakoted. So for operating the Law Tactical folder, it is simply one button, as you can see right here. It is locked in. When it does lock up, it is very nice and tight. You see it does have a very pretty heavy-duty hinge on here. You simply push the button, it opens up. Now there is no locking mechanism that holds it closed. You do have the ability to add some tension, increase resistance, decrease the resistance, and how easily the hinge folds. I have found that the way it comes from the factory set up is pretty good. As far as the lock and open, like I mentioned, it does not have the ability to do that. Just simply close it, and then you're locked in. You can hear the audible click of the Law Tactical folder once you do close it. Once you do have the folder in the closed position, this thing is absolutely rock solid. I mean, outside of a little bit of wiggle room that you would get between your buttstock wiggling in the buttstock, which has nothing to do with the folder. I mean, it is definitely super rock solid. So why would you want to add a Law Tactical folder to your gun? Well, the main reason is for smaller size, right? Smaller, having more compactness to your gun. So whether that be for transport in a vehicle, let's say you're in a patrol car or whatever it may be, where having a full-length AR is just a little bit cumbersome, you could ride and have it folded. Definitely be a lot smaller package. Definitely takes out the extra length that you get from the receiver extension and the buttstock itself. Another reason would be for storage, storage, transportation in a bag. I know in today's day and age, in the crazy world that we live in, some people do like to carry an AR on them. I do not typically do that, but there are times when I travel and I would like to have a gun with me, and I don't want to bring it in a giant, massive bag, or maybe even the bag that I have is not, it's filled with all my other travel gear. So let me take the camera out real quick. Something like this bag right here, which is the Vertex, I believe it's the Gamut, or maybe it's the Commuter. I don't quite remember, but this bag here, you see it is larger than a standard backpack, but it doesn't scream, hey, look, there's a tactical guy carrying a gun in his bag. I definitely feel that when I'm traveling and I'm going in and out of hotel rooms, if I'm carrying that backpack, it's not gonna raise any unwanted attention. So the Vertex bag is it's 21 inches long. I can say with the shortest AR that I own is this Mark 18, which has a 10.3 inch barrel, and with the stock folded on it, it is just barely long enough to fit in the backpack and still being able to zip it. Anything shorter than that, obviously, it's gonna fit even more and work even better for you. And also, you know, if you choose to have a larger bag than this Vertex, you could accommodate longer guns. But for the stuff that I own, especially the next size up from this Mark 18, my 12.5 inch build, it doesn't even come remotely close from being able to fit into that Vertex bag. So for needing your AR to be a smaller, more compact size for whatever reason, whether it be transportation in a vehicle or whatever reason you want, the Law Tactical version folder is an awesome piece of or accessory for your AR-15. Just one of the things to keep in mind that due to the way that the system in an AR operates, you cannot fire this with the buttstock in the folded position. Well, technically you can. I know Aaron Cowan showed in his video of the review of it years ago. You can fire it with the stock folded, but it is only going to be one shot. Obviously, the BCG can't move forward, which means it can't eject the spent casing, and it definitely can't pick up a new casing. So it'll basically be a single shot, but in a dire emergency or in a pinch, you can break off one shot, shut it, empty the chamber, and simultaneously load a new round and be back in action. And that's actually a good segue into why you may not want a law tactical folder. Besides not being able to fire it while it's closed, first I'm going to talk about cost. So these things are definitely not cheap. Depending on where you get it from in various sales, you can be looking to spend anywhere from $200 to say $240. Definitely not a cheap piece of change for a lot of people, including myself. And next, I want to talk about how it affects the current recoil system that you have on it. So, I mentioned earlier that the folding mechanism itself is 8.5 ounces, and that the receiver extension that plugs into the back of your BCG that weighs 2 ounces itself. So now you have an additional 2 ounces of mass that you have to think about when it comes to the buffer weights. They're not quite the differences between each buffer weight. So whether it be carbine, H2, H3, H4, etc., they're not quite a full 2 ounces. You do pretty much have to consider that when you add a law tactical folder, that you're going up a buffer weight. So this one here, my Mark 18, came with a heavy buffer on it. So basically now, since I added the folder, or the folder that came on it, it's really like running an H2. So if you don't have extra buffers, you may have to take into consideration that you may have to buy a new one and go down a size from what you currently have. Though I will say that while this came from the factory, obviously with the heavy buffer, like I mentioned, my 12.5 build, I am running a Springco Blue Spring, which is 15% stiffer, and I'm running an H3 weight buffer. So once I added that to my 12.5, I was very interested to see how that would affect the cycling of the gun. I was actually very surprised to see that it didn't affect it at all. So your results may vary depending on your gun, gas port size, etc., etc. And further talking about weight, 10.5 ounces overall. That is about 2/3 of a pound of weight that you're adding to your gun. I did build my 12.5 originally without a law tactical folder on it, and I shot it a few times, larped around the house with it. And I will say that once I moved the original black one that was on my Mark 18 over to my 12.5, noticeable difference in heft on your gun. Again, 2/3 of a pound. That's considerable over in added overall weight. Like the old mantra, ounces equals pounds and pounds equals pain. You do definitely feel like right off the bat the difference by adding the law tactical folder onto your AR. Another potential downside to adding the law tactical folder on your AR may be introducing more potential risks of failure. Obviously, you have hinges that can fail. You could have this part that could break itself, though I don't find that very probable. If for whatever reason you took your BCG apart in the field, which again, this may be a little bit more practical, or I should say probable, but you cannot remove your upper receiver. You can't hinge it up without removing the receiver extension right here that comes with it. Now it has 2 O-rings on it, so as you see there, so it does not just want to easily fall out. But let's say again you want to crack this thing open out in the field. You pulled out the receiver extension, you shut it back or shoved the BCG back in and then cracked it open, and you happen to put this down somewhere in the grass or put it down somewhere in haste or dropped it, whatever it may be, and you couldn't find it again, you're going to be pretty much screwed because your gun is not going to operate. It's not going to operate at all without having this receiver extension in there to make up for the added length of the tactical folder itself. So something to consider. Again, it may not be very probable but just one of the things that could potentially be a risk or a downside. And then lastly, overall, I want to discuss the practicality of it, and something that may be something as a downside, or at least something to think about. Like I mentioned, for me personally, having one of my 10-3 to fit in my Vertex bag, the 10-3 being the longest, at least the gun that I currently own, that's the longest that it can fit in my bag. 12 and a half doesn't even remotely fit. This isn't actually my 12 and a half. This is a 14-inch LMT L7D1 that I just put together. So very, very much not going to fit into any of my backpacks that I currently own, especially the Vertex. But I feel that after adding it on to my 12 and a half, considering that's the only bag that I have to carry a gun in, that it's kind of pointless putting this on here. Not at least I should say, maybe not necessarily pointless, but the added weight that it added to my 12 and a half, I'm not really a big fan of it. Considering that I stake my castle nuts in order to remove this, I would have to obviously take my receiver extension apart, break loose the castle nut, take off the end plate, remove the Law Tactical folder, and then install it into the receiver just like a standard AR. Being that I stake my castle nuts, I would either have to buy another new end plate, which I just put this one on, or purchased to put the Law Tactical folder onto this receiver itself. Again, you're not talking about huge amounts of money, but for the meantime, I'm going to run it as is. But I'm going to say that for me and my purposes, preferences, and usage, I may end up taking this off in the future. Also, my marquee team was my first experience with the Law Tactical folders, and I had a choice of getting, at the time it was just a pistol, the standard pistol or the one with the Law Tactical. Having the LT on there added, if I remember correctly, about $150. So I went ahead and just got it because it was cool. Having an AR, folding stocks, there's definitely a certain coolness and aesthetic that comes with it. So that's why I chose to run it. But from a practical standpoint, for my usage preferences, etc., I don't really need a stock to fold for anything more than being able to put it in my Vertex bag. I have owned several other guns in the past years that had folding stocks on them. My Galil Ace Gen 2 has a folding stock on it. My old Arsenal SLR 106 had a folding stock on it. I had a Sega 12 that had a folding stock on it. I believe there's a couple other ones, and I really never used the folding stock on it. I would do it just kind of playing around with it, but for practical usage, I never really ended up using it. So, something to consider with all things in consideration, between the price, between the added weight, between the potential points of failure by adding this on here. If you don't really need your stock to fold, and you don't care about coolness factor, you might not even think the Log Tactical folder is cool, you might not want to get it. It is a decent chunk of money to purchase. It does add some reasonable heft to the overall weight of your rifle. And then again, the potential risk for failure. So I'm going to go with, or again, unless you have a requirement for transportation, whether that be in a bag or inside of a vehicle, the Law Tactical folder may not be the right choice for you. So that about wraps up this video. Hopefully it was useful for some of you out there. If you're sitting on the fence about picking up one of these folding mechanisms, again, don't have any other experience or any experience with any of the other folding mechanisms out there on the market, definitely rock solid. If you need it for the points that I brought up, don't hesitate to buy one. But again, for the cons or potential cons that I mentioned, that it may not be for you. So again, thank you very much for all of you 1,000 subscribers out there. Definitely appreciate the subscriptions, the views, and also the feedback I get. Definitely love hearing from you guys on the channel. But that about wraps up. Thank you everybody for watching. Have a good night.